Welcome everyone to the final thoughts section of the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
You
Part
stole my
one.
intro.
Dwibs, the game is over. Anyone, it's fair game.
Pretty much. So, since you seem
Well,
to have enjoyed our playthrough enough to have come to this part of all parts, we're here to give an overall sum up of our final thoughts of the game, as is per usual. But because our final thoughts may encompass quite a bit, this is part of the reason why it's its own video, as well as the fact that the finale part was long enough as it was already, and we didn't want to risk it going to like 2.5 hours or something like that. So, without further ado, let's begin our final thoughts. Who wants to go first?
Can I go first?
Sure.
go ahead.
Alright, I'll start off by listing the positives about the game, as you know, positive comes first and then negative. Positives, the game looks great. Whether it be the very few FMVs that it has, or the in-game graphics. Yeah, I do think that the in-game graphics are very spectacular, especially considering that it's mostly just one environment, the whole game, steampunk, pretty much. I mean, other than a couple of odd quirks with the doors, I do think the environments are good. The character models are on point. As for sound, I do enjoy the music for the most part, especially most of the remixes of the themes from the original game. Voice acting wise, again, I think it's all very solid. Cloud's VA's got a good blend of stoicism and dry wit. Tifa's, I like the performance. It's just Tifa's meant to be 20, not 30, but whatever.
Yeah, that's why I prefer Rachel A. Cook personally.
Again, the performance
I think
is
Rachel had a better voice for her.
well. I thought that the performance is fine, and it's again. I can cope with a slightly not quite fitting voice.
Now how
If the
about
performance
Child?
is fine.
Now how about Child Cloud and Child Tifa? Don't those sound totally like kids?
Yeah, I don't know, Jova. Maybe Cloud went through puberty a bit earlier.
Apparently, so did Tifa.
Well, they grew up. They grew up as close friends, so maybe.
Oh my!
Aerith sounds fine, although that's the one case where I can't really compare her to her other voices, seeing as though I've barely heard any of them. The only other one I heard was the one game. The one time Aerith had the voice of I forgot her name. Whoever voiced the
Rapunzel.
first Kingdom Hearts.
Rapunzel.
Mandy Moore.
Yeah,
Oh,
Mandy Moore. Yeah, there you are.
yeah.
I haven't heard the other two vocal performances, so I'm not going to compare it to those. But yeah, and everyone else, I think is very solid. And like I said earlier, I'm not gonna give too much. I'm not gonna get too much hate towards Zach's voice, seeing as though he only had like 10 lines, whereas everyone else has had like a bunch more. Hell, even some of the new side characters we see had more lines in them than Zach did. So again, I'll give him a pass if he does a better vocal performance if we see him in the future, then great. If he doesn't, well. The controls, the battles is also really good. It's very fast paced. It's it responds well. I mean, it has to as an action RPG. And I do appreciate the game slowing down a lot when you're going through the menus, although not so much to the point where you still can't get hit. Still a matter of timing. And also the times where I froze on some of the characters as soon as they get hit and start getting launched into the air was funny. That's unintentional, granted, but still. As for the ATB system, I do think that I don't know, maybe you should have gotten more of it the more you level up. Instead of just being stuck with 2 throughout the game, unless you use Aerith's power of splitting the gauge into 3. Maybe they'll do that in the next game or something. I don't know.
Perhaps.
But that was that was my one issue with how you use magic in the game. I think MP was enough. Throwing ATB on it, especially since you can't level it up normally, was a bit of a hindrance. I thought.
That Dwibs was introduced as a way to balance not just for you how to spam magic, but also the character's innate abilities. That you acquire through the weapons.
I thought that's what MP was for.
Well, for the magic, but the ATB manages to encompass both for you to execute an action, like those, and also using items. Again, it is a way to introduce a balance for you to not being too advantaged and spamming those offensive or healing moves.
I still think you should have been able to get more of it when you level up, and also get stronger attacks at the cost of spending more of it.
Yeah, actually, you do, Dwibs. Like some ATB moves, like Cloud, the ability the Cloud gets through the hard edge, or stuff like Barrett's, the equivalent of Younger Max, actually do consume more ATB charge for having more power.
I know that. I mean, alongside getting more ATB as you go along. Anything else I could mention?
Well, okay.
Narrative?
Pre-chapter 18, what did you think of the story?
I thought for the most part it was very fun. Although the Dementors, the more the Dementors showed up, the more fed up I got of them.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they were distracting you from the story.
Yeah, and it was like well, that's the thing. It's a remake, and I get you're gonna do some things different to the other game. Otherwise, what's the point in calling it a remake? But some of the changes they did, I thought were a bit odd. I mean, it's not even. I mean, again, it's mainly to do with the Dementors. Like like I said before, we've been doing stuff differently from the original game throughout the whole thing, and the Dementors didn't show up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, Dwibs, Monolith Soft recently compared to the 7 Remake, managed to prove with Xenoblade Chronicles that making an almost one-to-one remake just with much better engine and graphics can be possible and profitable. So I don't know.
Although, okay, I do admire Square Enix's balls to take something as beloved as Final Fantasy VII and do radically different stuff with it.
Oh yeah, I guess it's called. I guess you can define it as refugee audacity. Like we're doing it, so might as well go full through.
Yeah, because I mean, at this point, I think in terms of finances at least, I think Square are in a much better position to do something like this now than they would say 5 years ago or something.
Pretty much, the reports constantly say that thanks to the MMOs and the mobile games, actually they are managing to have stable incomes, which allows them to experiment and allow themselves to do more stuff that normally they wouldn't have done, like reproposing old titles and having stuff like the Trials of Mana remake, which they could have easily not do that, just have a translation of the original like they were doing with the collection. But no, they actually did the HD remake for that as well.
See, I admire their balls in doing something so drastic with a beloved game. But that could also, depending on what they do in the future, that could also backfire. Because I mean, if any changes they make end up sucking, or if they barely change anything at all, then it could kind of dampen the whole experience. Like, I don't know. Say we do like if we do stuff that's both not as good as the original and not that good in its own right anyway, that could dampen the whole thing.
obviously.
Mhm.
Also, yeah, I mean, even if you're even with their finances doing better, from what I've gathered, their reputation amongst the fandom is still up in the air, depending on what part of Final Fantasy you're interested in.
Even in general,
If it's the MMOs, it's going along just fine. If it's the spin-offs, it's just whatever. They're spin-offs. I mean, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but at the end of the day, no one really pays any mind to those in the grander scheme of things.
Even in general, Dwibs, don't forget that Square authorized or at least let pass by the absolute quality gem that was The Quiet Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people are
But
going to be
with,
complaining
Like
that
that's
it's
like I said, the dangers of experimenting. Sorry, go on.
But mainline games wise, their reputation again, not counting the MMOs, the reputation of the previous few mainline games has been
mixed.
iffy to say the least. There was the whole 13 trilogy debacle. I mean, like those games or not, I know you guys don't, but still,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like them or not, and there's trying to get over some of the vitriol those games got was always going to be a difficult task, especially considering they were like the only single player representation throughout the PS3 360 gem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And 15 well, 15's divisive reaction didn't really help either, especially considering
Sorry, go on.
how they told the story. Through whether it was through the main game or through the DLC they added, or whether the story was good in the first place, or the game, nearly turning my PS4 into a rocket.
But well, Dave, so maybe that's the reason why Square decided to repurpose the development of the 7 remake in the way we're having right now, because they kept saying one other thing they kept saying in interviews is that now, at least for the time being, they're considering these parts of the 7 remake as mainline entries in terms of focus and priority for the company. So I do wonder if the eventual Final Fantasy 16 is being postponed to make way first for this remake.
Would not surprise me.
Also, I can only imagine what this would be like for just a casual RPG fan who doesn't quite get how Final Fantasy works. It's like they 13, 14, 15, and now back to 7.
Honestly,
I mean,
that ship has been sailed by the fact that America got very confusing with the numbering when they called Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 2, and Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 3. Only for years later for them to find out that, oops, it was a lie.
Yeah.
hell, you think that's bad? What about Europe? Europe didn't. I mean,
At least
Europe
when
doesn't get half the shit.
that's the thing, Waves. At least when Europe got 7, they didn't call it just Final Fantasy 1. No, it was 7. Again, if anything, to me, it created the mystery of knowing what were the previous chapters.
I mean, they did release the anthologies and that.
Eventually, yeah.
But back to the remake. I do think the characterization. Again, I'm only comparing it to the original game. I haven't seen any of the compilation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I've got one on Blu-ray. I think the characterization was also very fine. At times they might have, maybe altered a few bits and pieces to be more up to date. Well, i.e., and I know it's not necessarily characterization, but no typos for a start. And more natural sounding dialogue. I mean, it has to be more natural sounding if it's being spoken. I mean, it's one thing having rather silly dialogue in a game that has no voice acting, like the original.
Uh-huh.
But it's 2020. We're on PS4 now, so yeah, I can see why they changed a lot of the dialogue, and it still works. It still conveys the same message the original dialogue had, just more up to date in how they do it. All right. Okay, I've already ranted enough about the side quest of the old guy, so I'm not going to do so again here. And the rest of them, I thought, I mean, the actual stories going through them were okay. I just wasn't a big fan of how most of them were just fetch quests.
Fair enough.
I mean, maybe a bit more variety could have helped, as opposed to just running around fetching kids, dogs, cats, paper. I don't know, I'm surprised there wasn't a side quest called find the missing rock or something. It turns out the rock's sorry. It turns out this rock was actually materia, so you can have this one.
All right.
And the others, the ones that involve fighting enemies, they were fine. I mean, they do their job. They help get you more experience. But I mean, generally, I can take or leave the side quests. I hope that I do hope that they stick with their guns from the ending and not just cave into fan pressure, because that's been a trend throughout all of media that's been worrying me recently. I mean, it's one thing to listen to fan feedback, taking what they're saying and improve the game or film or whatever based on that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's starting to be a line blurred between that and just letting the fans direct the thing while they're at it. There was, like recently there was the whole thing with Sonic's redesign in the movie. I mean, it was a good thing that happened, but I'm just hoping that doesn't become a thing that just goes on all the time. I mean, they're artists. I mean, they should be allowed to do their vision how they want to, and we should be allowed to judge their vision of whether we think is good or bad. But if we start taking it over, there might as well be no artists.
All right.
But yeah, I'm done. I'm guessing the next couple of games are just going to be more down in terms of changing stuff. But again,
we'll see. All in good time,
We'll see.
Pedro?
Well, for me, it's just like outside of the issues that we've already discussed when it comes to the final chapter, I think the story is very well told, and the characterization is pretty much flawless in terms of how well the characters are written. Their relationships are incredibly well done, and so I have no complaints whatsoever in that regard. The gameplay is absolutely brilliant. So many games have tried. So many RPGs have tried a middle ground between turn-based combat and action combat, but none of them have really well, there have been some good blends. None of them have managed to quite capture the best of both. But this one is the first one that, for my money, was the first one to succeed at that. Because this battle system is, in my opinion, the best battle system they could come up with to cater to modern sensibilities while still preserving turn-based elements for the old crowd that prefers turn-based stuff. In fact, and I've said before, like, to me, this should become the standard battle system of the single-player Final Fantasies, as far as I'm concerned. This is I know it won't, because I know how Square's developers work.
Well, it's in a general sense, Pedro. Unfortunately, each Final Fantasy wants to reinvent its battle system in some kind of way, so it's inevitable that. Sorry.
Well, according to Kitase, it's up to the director of the game. So.
Well, we have never seen them sticking too much. Each new entry changes something very drastical about the battle system.
Remember, originally, this game was going to have the battle system of Versus.
Yeah.
And we saw that in the 2015 gameplay trailer. It was only later, because of the backlash from the turn-based crowd, that they decided to try a middle ground between the two. Mm-hmm. That's most likely why there was that big period of silence, because they had to rethink the whole game because of it, probably. Mm-hmm. Now, in hindsight, now we know why that was a thing. aside from that, yeah, the gameplay is fantastic. Like again, like I've said various times, side quests in JRPGs always boil down to bounties and side quests for the most part. Like a Persona does this, Ni no Kuni does this. It's just the standard. Like to me, it's more about whether or not the game is fun to play in general, and whether or not the story is told in set fetch quests are fun. Because if the game has done its job and do those two things, people are willing to fetch whatever it is they're told to fetch. I will argue. Like the problem with the side quests the side quests in this game are perfectly functional and there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They do not reach the level of a Ni no Kuni 2 side quest or something like that. They're fine stories on their own merit. It's just that there have been better side quest stories in JRPGs. So no, they're perfectly functional and they work. There's nothing inherently wrong with them. They're just not particularly noteworthy, and that's the basic gist of it for the side quests. What else? The music is fantastic. Fantastic remixes. I love all the music in this game. All of it. The graphics look fantastic. Yeah, there's some minor issues with the textures loading, but whatever. That's just honestly, from someone who has platinumed the damn thing, honestly, it's so hard for me to even give a shit about that, to be honest, considering how little of a thing it is, to be honest. What else? And that's about it, really. Like, I found this to be an overall fantastic game on its own right. And even in terms of Final Fantasy VII, in terms of recreating Final Fantasy VII, final chapter aside, I think they did a fantastic job in basically capturing the spirit of it. That's one of the main reasons why I'm willing to see where they're going with this, because they didn't capture the specifics of it, but they captured the spirit of it, which is the most important thing. They captured the most important things.
Would you say they captured the spirits within?
No.
What they did, the basic gist of it is the core of what made the characters and the themes work in the original game is here present. If they're going to execute it differently, but still carry the same characterization from this game, and still have the same themes and storylines to an extent, I'm okay with that as long as it's well executed. We'll have to wait and see how it goes. But for now, we just have to wait for Part 2 to properly see if this gamble will pay off or not. So that's about it for me.
Okay,
Shira, you ready?
Sure. Yeah, it was really fun, actually. Ending aside and Dementors aside, since, we have talked about each of those multiple times throughout the LP anyway, the game at least looks fun to play. It's nice that it didn't strictly stick to turn-based, because, it could have been a bit more fun if they did stick to it these days, because they probably could have done a lot more with it, whereas in the original, it's kind of
limited.
I just, with turn-based combat, like with what seems to be the early Final Fantasy stuff and Pokemon games, is just, I feel like I'm not really doing much at all.
That's the trade-off, Shiro. The idea behind turn-based is that you're taking your time, but you have to compensate by picking your moves correctly, strategize or die. While in an action game, you're focusing more on speed, and your positioning towards the enemy.
Well, I do like turn-based combat as long as I feel like I'm doing something. So there are exceptions to that rule, and Ni no Kuni is also, the first one is also a nice middle ground, personally. The music is very good. I need to listen to it on my own time, though, because, there's a lot of noise and everyone's talking, so I can never really say what I think of a soundtrack from this. It's nice that they were able to give the characters more interaction. I understand with the first place it was just purely down to limitations, but it was nice to see everybody interact and actually, be more involved and just feel like they're growing more naturally as a team. It's just really nice to, like, even the side characters who may or may not be dead now. Like, even there, Like, even they're nice, you know. It's nice when you have also an RPG where the NPCs aren't like the most boring people alive. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it like also cats. There's cats everywhere. I very
Yes.
much appreciate the
Oh, that's
cat
right.
propaganda in this game.
There's the one thing I forgot to mention. It's not too much of a spoiler, more like a theory. One thing that I discussed with my friend. It's connected to the cat. To the cats.
Wait,
Well,
what?
yes. Well, you guys were arguing. Were arguing. Wait, why was Kate Sith near enough to the Sector 7 during and Reeve sent it? Well, what are a lot of things? What is a thing what is present a lot during Sector 7? Cats. The general idea is that Reeve has been spying on Avalanche for a long time, using Kate Seed as a proxy by, confounding himself, camouflaging himself among the cats. So that's also why he might have been, close to that. But
Now
again,
He's probably been here the whole time.
just another speculation, for example.
Now you've got me imagining the cats from the 2019 movie returning to wreak their revenge
Please no.
on us.
But continue.
That's
Sorry.
really where this plot is going. We're gonna get the Cats movie.
Oh god. Cats 2019, cross-referencing with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now get your creepy as all heck Cats costumes for the party.
We do not want Hojo in that.
Oh god.
But anyway, one other thing, the voice acting is like, aside from certain characters sounding much older than they probably should, the voice acting is still very good. So I can let it slide that people sound a little bit older. The same way how a lot of young anime boys sound like girls. So I could just, it's something I can ignore.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, unless it's one of the cases where you have Usagi's original dub voice, who made a 13-year-old sound like she was 40, who smoked. Like, unless it's something like that, I think I can ignore that kind of thing.
Again, don't you mean Serena?
No, I don't mean that. Go away.
Yeah,
That's what she was called in that dub.
Stick to the thoughts.
Yes. No, that's pretty much it. It will be nice to see where they go from here, and I'm still waiting for the
super duper complete edition.
Yeah, with the director's
Same.
cut and all that. It'll be a lot of money, I'm sure, but I'll wait for that.
It'll be like that bloody Kingdom Hearts, the story so far compilation or something.
And then
But
there'll
of
be another
course.
one like less than half a year later.
Probably.
All right.
And even half a year later than that on X.
I'll give them a decade.
All right, I'll go next then.
Go ahead,
Go
Trevor.
ahead.
Yeah, even though I'm still, like Shiroi, waiting for the Super Complete Edition, this was a very fun experience. I actually did get to play this game. Yeah, I really do like the gameplay. Now, is it for everyone? No, but it's still a very good mix. It's a very good attempt to try and please as much people as possible, all things considered here. Now I'll start off with the voice acting. Cloud's new voice actor is pretty good. It is kind of a shame that Steve Burton didn't get to really show how much he'd improved, but hey, small beans. I'm gonna agree that Tifa's voice actress isn't as good as Rachel A. Cook's, though she's pretty nice as well. As for Arcea, yeah, I really enjoyed her. I'd say I consider her pretty much equal with Mandy Moore. Probably helps that Aerith actually gets to have her good old characterization back for this game, which has been gone for, God, nearly 2 decades now. Actually, no, over 2 decades. Jesus Christ, the 7 compilation in Kingdom Hearts did a number on her. Let's see.
Well, I mean, I could get Kingdom Hearts doing characterization a bit differently as a separate series. But
Yeah.
the compilation.
Pretty much, Dwibs, that's the thing. The compilation's take on the 7 cast is pretty much the same as Kingdom Hearts' take on the 7 cast, for better
I
or
get it
for
works for
worse.
Kingdom Hearts. I get it could work for Kingdom Hearts, just not the other one.
Anyway, yeah, let's see, that was that. Red 13's voice actor. Yeah, I actually like him. I actually consider him a step up from Lion O'Brien. Good on that. Then there's Sephiroth. I'm sorry, I know this new guy is trying, but he does not weigh up to George Newbern.
No,
Jova's not happy.
he's a very good Sephiroth, but it's not a fantastic Sephiroth.
Sure,
And
sure.
Hashtag not my Sephiroth.
George Newbern was absolutely perfect in the role.
Like, seriously,
It's
George...
like the hashtag not my Yoshi.
Listen to me, George Newbern was perfect from top to bottom. Like, he literally was also the voice of Superman, so it fit in with the theme of how big a figure Sephiroth was, and every inflection in George Newbern's voice is just perfect for the character here. This guy sounds like he's trying to go for a George Newbern impression, but it doesn't weigh up. And like I said, he's not bad, but George Newbern is just that much better. Alas. As for Zax, yeah, this newcomer doesn't have anything on Rick Gomez. Like, even though he has very few voice lines, I feel like he could have done better. Shame on that. As for a lot of the other voice casts, yeah, they do their job well, you know. They all sound nice, well varied, and whatnot here. The visuals in this game are pretty top-notch, aside from a few graphical errors and some stuff where it kind of goes a bit weird with the doors here and there. It still looks pretty great. Everything is upscaled and brought to the newest generation in such a marvelous fashion here and there. Well done on that. As for the character writing, it is so refreshing to see characterization come back. Now, granted, as me and Tio have said, Cloud's characterization was starting to return in stuff like Dissidia NT and, of course, Super Smash Bros. 4. Thank you, Sakurai. But yeah, the cast as a whole is more to it. Like, instead of just being, oh, I'm big and stoic, Sephiroth once again has more of his cocky side to him. Tifa has a lot more of her spunk that she had, and Aerith even gets to have more of her own shenanigans here and there, showing that, yeah, she's not just a prim and proper girl. Hell, now she even swears, which is honestly, if you can ask me.
She got the sass, yo. Even
Yeah.
at the end, as we've noticed, when she has to confront Sephiroth, Cloud is like, oh, Cloud, stop. Yeah, screw him. Like that.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, hell, okay, even if she does have to die by Sephiroth, at least she can say that she gave it to him quite a bit before he coughed her. But yeah, Red 13 is pretty much in character. Barrett is so in character with some new layers added that I especially do love. Not just that those layers weren't in the original, but here they're a lot more subtle about it as opposed to having to spell it out all the time. Probably helps that because the whole thing's voice acted, you can now get stuff better from the inflections in characters' voices here and there. Rufus is back with a weird shredded coat, but he can sure as hell fight with that
Shut up,
laser
Joe,
gun
but don't
cord.
question Ferrari's choices.
Heidegger looks great in the new relook here and there. Reeve looks as beleaguered as I would expect a poor guy to look. Seriously, it's only a matter of time till he keels over from the stress of the job. Palmer is as slimy looking as I would expect. Scarlet is... Okay, I'll admit, Scarlet was not what I was expecting, but holy cow, I'm looking forward to that slap fight between her and Tifa now even more. It's gonna be great.
I originally thought they might not include that because it could have been potentially problematic, but if they found a way to actually manage to include properly, Cloud actually cross-dressing, at this point the gates are open, everything's fair game.
Oh yeah. And speaking of Cloud cross-dressing, Don Corneo's return was marvelously done. Everything about it. Even showing that he's a capable fighter in there too. But it's not just the returning characters. The new characters introduced for this, be it from, supplementary material or whatnot, are pretty well and done. But, of course, I can't talk about the characters without talking about everyone's favorite couple, Reno and Rude. First of all, props that we actually get to see more of Rude in this, and the fight with him is quite interesting. They even have that little reference of you getting to see what his face looks like under those sunglasses when you break them. Just like in Advent Children. Of course, Reno is salty as ever after Cloud nearly kills him to the point where he is literally gunning for Cloud with an attack helicopter. Jesus Christ. And Sang's as stoic and creepy as ever. Good to see they kept that on board. Interesting to see how they'll do Elena. And of course, Hojo. Kooky and crazy as ever right out of the oven. And it seems he's ever so proud of his baby boy Sephiroth.
He's also creepy to boot.
Well, Shiroy, where do you think Sephiroth gets his creepiness from?
What did Lucrezia see he saw in him? Seriously.
She must have seen something very
I guess it's the scientist's secret trick.
I guess. I guess for him to get laid. Giddy. But yeah, that's the characters. As for the side quests, a lot of side quests are fun, but I will admit I would have liked to have seen more variety in some of the side quests here. Hopefully we'll get to see more of that in Part 2 and onwards. I can see how that's a bit of a downtrade. Now, what is great is some of the results you'll get from doing certain side quests here and there. I might as well move on. I do love how this game does add on more layers of choice to here. Now, it's not like you're doing anything major story changing yet, but, you know, stuff like getting to pick which dress Tifa will wear, which dress Aerith will wear, and best of all, which dress Cloud will wear, is quite interesting and done for subtle enough means that you can figure out here and there. Hell, the game literally rewards you based off of how many side quests that you finished in Chapter 8, and you get from a rinky-dink outfit of Aerith's to a classic rendition of her famous red chair outfit. Yes, I call it the red chair outfit because I will never forget Aerith slamming a chair down on that guy like she's a flipping wrestler. Seriously, Aerith is awesome in this game. And yes, as you can figure, Aerith with the chair has become a meme at this point. My favorite one is the one when she's about to whack Sephiroth, who's praying at the altar. But yes, that's awesome. The side quests weren't the best, but they got the job done. The music. This should be... Okay, I get that this can't always be the case in certain games, but by God, this, in a perfect world, this would be the optimum best option of how to do a soundtrack remake here and there. You know, like, they give us many different renditions of classic themes. So if one doesn't suit your fancies, well, here's another rendition that does it better. My only problem with the sound design was they didn't put the actual oppressive theme in, like, Wall Market like they should have, which is a shame because they had the perfect remix of it, but for some reason didn't put it there, and it's literally only shows up for a cutscene. That's the only time I went, what the hell, at the soundtrack? Otherwise, though, it pretty much fulfilled my wishes and wants, and thankfully averted disappointing me. Special mention goes to that Airbuster theme, the Arsenal theme, Crazy Motorcycle Chase, Sephiroth's Boss theme, Reno's theme, Rude's theme, well, pretty much the soundtrack in general. Oh, well done. And the additions are also great here and there. So, yeah, let's talk about the story. Okay, for the most part, this is a pretty great rendition of the game. Like, they add in some new stuff here and there, but a lot of it works. I will say this, though, the game does at times have a bit of a pacing issue. Sometimes things tend to get dragged out a bit more than they needed to. I'll admit, the sewer level kind of did feel like it wore out its welcome for me here. Special mention, of course, goes to the train graveyard level. Not a bad level per se, but one that does feel like padding. It's something that probably would have been better put as like a sequence in part 2, or something that wasn't put in the middle of the sewer level and the whole falling of Sector 7 bit. Like, because it feels out of place and never really gets brought up again. And that's not to say that it wasn't still cool with the renditions of the Ghost and bringing back still that special enemy for the boss, which, yeah, like Gio said, that's a great thing this game does, is bringing back a lot of enemies, sometimes as souped up boss fights as well. Again, also with their own themes and all. But yeah, overall I love the story, but I will admit it does have a bit of a pacing issue. Now, about the Dementors here, I'll just say it right now. Whether or not you like or hate the ending, I'm just gonna say this: the Ghost, in the long run, ended up making this not be newcomer friendly. That mainly has to do with the ending here. Like, okay, I do hope that they stick to their guns, but I will say this. They should have, okay, if they knew that they were going to do things this way, they should have altered the story so that we at least get a better semblance of what's going on. Like, if they had to, give us the backstory about Zack earlier. Give us what Cloud thinks is his backstory about Sephiroth earlier in here so that we get what the deal with Sephiroth is. And also, help fill in the details for certain details because, like I said, for this game as a whole, your enjoyment is best had if you've played the original 7, if you pretty much know the ins and outs of the compilation, mainly Crisis Core and a bit of other stuff here, because by the end of this game, it ain't newcomer friendly. Like, okay, for as much arguments as there may be, the people who suffer in the end are the newcomers, which is really a shame, because this should be a game that is great for newcomers to get into. But at the end of the day, in truth, this game is more of a sequel. Like, even calling it a reimagining is a bit of a stretch because it blatantly does reference stuff that Sephiroth could only know if he came from Advent Children time, unless they're retconning it to the point that he has that, and all the same, still, time travel's involved, so yeah, it's pretty much a sequel to the 7 compilation. As to which point it's a sequel from, that's another question for any other day. But yeah, my biggest complaint is that this game, sadly, is not newcomer friendly. And that is why I say this. For them to have made as much a big deal about Destiny and changing the time stream or whatnot as they did, it would be a big disappointment if they just chicken out of it and then go, oh, turns out we're not really changing much because, well, yeah, the Dementors are a very problematic story element here and there. We can talk on all about if they're supposed to be an audience surrogate or whatnot, but they play such a big role in the game to the point where, at times, I'll admit they were beginning to kind of take away some of the tension on whether or not certain people will live or die, because, well, they'll pretty much solve it. Now, it is pretty cool that we did get to destroy them. So, like the character said, Destiny is not set in stone. What I am waiting to see is how Square will now take things from here and there. And like Tio said, it's been a mess regarding whoever you ask from Square how they're going to handle things. And I'll just say it right now, I get it. You know, they didn't want to spoil the surprise, but they kind of fell into that same trap that Marvel tends to when advertising certain events. They pretty much resorted to having to lie in order to sell the game as it is. And again, I can get it not wanting to spoil, but I do wish that maybe after this we can go to an era where we can at least be somewhat honest, you know, without, you know, you can be more honest without having to lie, or like I said, they should have just found a way to make this more newcomer friendly. That's my major issue with this as a remake.
I mean, it's not as... Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's my biggest issue with this as a remake. Like, hell, I don't even hate the ending. I actually did cheer when I saw that Zack got to live, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge are alive. Like, I wasn't mad at that per se. I was interested as all heck. What worried me is how this will clash with however the timeline is supposed to go now that this is an original, and how confused newcomers would be with this, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what a lot of people did want for this, was a means to be able to get into Final Fantasy VII without having to play the admittedly rather aged original Final Fantasy VII. So I'm just going to let you know right up front, you're not getting exactly the original Final Fantasy VII here. You're getting a new venture here. And this is great for those of us who have already played and tried it. But again, if you wanted the original 7 remade, sorry, that's not exactly what you're getting. I hope you still enjoy it still, though.
I was gonna say,
So
I don't think the marketing was as deceptive as, say, The Last of Us 2 that flat out had altered cutscenes.
Nowhere close.
But nowhere even close. No.
Hell, if anything, they did show a couple of the more spoilery scenes, like Barrett getting stabbed, the scenes where Sephiroth absorbs a meteor, for example. So technically speaking, the hints were there, but like Pedro mentioned, we just did not have the context about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Anyway,
that is my final thoughts.
That's
Tio,
for me
close
to
us
conclude.
out.
As you can imagine, having for me to judge the game, I mean, being a person that has actually pretty much grown with the original. Remember, I have such a nostalgic connection with the original, even if after all these years I have found, the negative things about it, like the mistranslations, the weird localization stuff, missing parts, plot holes everywhere, gameplay limitation, and all the such. But at least for this first part, ending aside, obviously, everything else it's the same that I kept saying for the marketing. I don't really have any major complaints, I like the characterization, I like the character design. I don't believe it's a bit bad. It's different than the actual more photorealistic style that Square had been using for 13 and 15. This is definitely a bit more anime-ish to resemble also the original artworks, which to me is for the better. Like I said, I always conceptualize Final Fantasy more as with anime, pure anime aesthetics rather than looking photorealistic, but I know that Square Enix wants to pride itself on its graphical compartment, so it's a thing that needs to happen. As is for the combat, I will unfortunately always be a fan of turn-based, but it's not a thing tied to the VII Remake. It's been a long time since I accepted the fact that Final Fantasy, like I said, keeps evolving with each title. So the turn-based combat is not probably going to happen anymore because the fan base, it has evolved to a point also where both the developers and the fan base are accustomed to having to try with a bit more action. So I'm actually more grateful that at least they try to do a more strict compromise here instead of just making it like Kingdom Hearts, for example.
Plus, it's not like Square aren't making turn-based RPGs anymore.
No, there's World of Final Fantasy. There's the games made by Tomoya Azano's team.
There's Dragon Quest.
So those who want more traditional Final Fantasy games can keep an eye on the Brave of the Default series and
if you have shameless plug moment, if you actually are looking for a new mobile game, play Dissidia Opera Omnia, which is basically the definitive Dissidia crossover with a very interesting plot, mind you, and actually a turn-based combat with its own particular gimmicks, and when it comes to gacha mobile titles, is actually very generous in the form of not having you to spend and not having to consume a stamina bar for pretty much anything. So if you want to just have an experience when you play turn-based and you enjoy a story, go play that. But anyway, going back to this. I like the voice acting. I understand that some are not, are not maybe on par with the original, like the Sephiroth's new voice actor, Tyler Hoechlin, sorry, may not be George Newborn. But aside from Zach, I really enjoy all of them as substitutes of the original cast. I'm sorry. I know that it might be similar case with the Sony transition between Jason Griffith and Roger Craigmith, but I do believe that no matter how much improvement would have got, Steve Burton was not a good choice as a voice for Cloud. Even in its debut role from Kingdom Hearts 1, where it's arguably, at least for me, at its best, because it's not mopey, but it's more it skips the stoic that Takahiro Sakurai does for the Japanese voice. Even then it lacks the spark that needs. But I do believe instead this one, Team Wolf Boy, I forgot the name, manages to actually recapture that more effectively. I honestly personally don't see the age difference when it comes to Tifa, for example. But again, I'm not. I need to remember a bit what originally Cook sounded like for the character, so I will have to do a more proper comparison later down the line. Barrett is the one that I don't remember any at all, because his line adventure Dirge Cerberus were so few. I know that his voice actor back then was a more popular one because he voiced one of the main supporting characters in Cowboy Bebop, for example. So it's not like the first person who was passing by. I like Max Mittelman as Red 13. I like the new Aerith voice actress that gives her the sass. And again, in general, everyone else seems to be spot on. The music, I expressed how I like some themes better than others. But honestly, the soundtrack as a whole, like I mentioned during the Arsenal boss fight, is again it should be the new golden standard. It just does so many remixes. It just customizes each fight and even each place, in a way that makes you remember. Oh, now the Baku reactor has a battle theme. Oh, now there's a boss theme just for the Scorpion, or one for the Airbus, or one for the Valkyrie, for example. It also gives more memorabilia to the memory capabilities to the video game. Now you will associate more an encounter to its corresponding soundtrack, which is quite ingenious as a marketing tool. If I really have to really nitpick something, I guess the game lacks a bit of lower key instrument, like bass, because for example, the Mako Reactor theme, aside from being more William Cressler and not having the weird electronic eerie instrument, you can tell that it doesn't feel as bombastic as it was in the original. But again, I'm literally just nitpicking because I still like this version as well. So I'm literally just wasting my voice here. What else? Delocalization, like I kept mentioning. As much as it's different, and I do believe in a couple of lines where something was lost in translation, I do believe this English translation, this new English localization, is actually really good. It's a return to form of the Square Enix pre-voice acting, I argue, because I do believe we started toning down the scripts with the rise of voice acting for Final Fantasy X, probably to adapt it to the voice actors, Characters are reprising to swear a lot, I argue. The dialogue feels more natural as a result, and it's less watching potentially characters on a stage play and instead actual people roaming around and doing shit, The most egregious example is, like it has been pointed out, Aerith losing her saint appearance, and not being holier than thou to refrain herself to swear when in a dangerous situation. That's just an example. The entire game is filled with moments like that. But I argue even the cutscene composition is actually superbly directed. I can't stress enough how important and well directed that scene where Barrett is talking to Cloud on the train, and to emphasize that he's talking seriously, he removes his sunglasses. That alone is such a powerful moment and showcase the characterization of both Cloud and Barrett with such simplicity. It makes you, again, fucking Toriyama directed this cutscene. Seriously, what happened between the 13th trilogy and this?
I guess he got a lot of discipline in between.
And Alicia.
Well, we've already discussed this too. Remember, he has Nomura over his shoulder, approving what he does and what he can't do.
Still, whatever. It worked for the better. Yeah, there are still the classic ash shots, but very in a lesser quantity, so that's fine. Some characters are less utilized than others, even for the new stuff. I was hoping Scarlet would have been a bit more utilized along with Heidegger. Like, for example, the chapters where the characters are traveling through the subway and Heidegger is spying them. I was hoping that Scarlet would have been there too. Again, it boosts Heidegger's characterization as well, also due to her, especially since in the original game, later down the line, both Heidegger and Scarlet start working more and more together, even to the point of them taking over after Rufus' supposed demise at Diamond Weapon. But honestly, no, it's fine. Hojo is fantastic in his depravity. I'm shocked that in this day and age we managed to have a villain so despicable and so disgusting, and yet still managed to make it interesting to see where it's going with and enjoyable in his evil hamminess. And once again, compared to the just like the rest of the game, it's a return to form and a showcase that they wanted to make the game with the same idea in mind of the original, including its themes. It's like a time capsule that has been, unveiled from the Earth. Sure, it's a bit dirty here and there, but it still has the shape, like that. What else? The gameplay, right? Well, I already mentioned, but I like the side quest. I'm a sucker for usually hunting missions, so even if a game was consistent only in that, like 13, I wouldn't have minded. But at least they bother to vary enough, even with the sub story of the Angel of the Slums. That's good. That's nice. The enemy variety, absolutely amazing. Again, like I said, they kept all the enemy variety that was in the original at that point of the game, plus adding some that weren't there, but it makes sense for now to them being here, plus some foreshadowing. I would say that I wish the Colosseum and the VR training had just a bit more fights. I know that hard mode adds a couple of them, including the Proud and Joy prototype, but I mean in a sense of a couple of more to also variety. I do believe that they did not put that much, into the side portion of that. But it's still a good time, and it also showcased to have stuff like the Victory Fanfare. It's also the new characters introduced, like the characters from the novels, or Chadley, for example, or the Don Corneo's lieutenants, all fit organically in here. Like they were always apart, including their attire, and they get to be memorable. About Madame M, for example, or Andrea Rodea. Sorry, I keep confusing myself. But still, so thoughts went into that, even for design and writing these. So yeah, I guess it's pretty much it, because I said everything I needed about the ending in the previous section. So I guess I'll just wait to see how the next part will be, if hopefully we'll ever get it, But yeah, and after this, I will start playing finally the game on hard mode and see how long do I last. Hopefully enough to get the platinum, but we'll see.
So, I believe we're all done. That was the end of part 1 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I hope you enjoyed our playthrough. And join us in about 3 years or so when we do part 2.
That's optimistic.
That's almost
very
optimistic.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.